Joining us now, CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt. His new book, out today, is entitled, "It Could Happen Here: Why America is Tipping from Hate to the Unthinkable and How We Can Stop It." So, Jonathan, if you could take us through this title even. Where are we in terms of this tipping point on hate?
Well, unfortunately, Mika, I think we're in a very frightening and delicate moment. Really, as laid out by the prior segment, what Brandy talked about and what Jared talked about, these issues are very real. In the last, not just 12 months, but in the last 5 years, we've seen a normalization of extremism and illiberalism. We've seen a weaponization of anti-Semitism and hate. And we've seen the amplification of the kind of intolerance and misinformation that you were just talking about. And I think many of us take for granted this democracy. We take for granted that what we have here today can persist forever. But I mean, I wrote this book, and it's deeply personal, as the grandson of a Holocaust survivor from Germany, who never would have imagined as a young man that the only country he had ever known would start to regard him as an enemy of the state and literally slaughter his entire family and destroy everything he had ever known. And I come to you today as the husband of a refugee from Iran, whose family, his lineage goes back there thousands of years, and who never could have imagined some 40 years ago that the country they had only ever known would turn on them and literally force them to flee for their very lives. And so today here in this country, there's no natural law that dictates that democracy will persist, particularly if we allow these forces of extremism and illiberalism to creep into the public square and further corrode our social fabric.
Well, and Jonathan, there's data behind it. You can look at what happened on January the 6th, but look at the data, even from a poll that was released this week. 40% of Republicans think violence against America's government is okay. 41% of independents believe violence against America's government is okay. 4 in 10. It's just absolutely horrifying. But that is where we are. Nobody's being melodramatic here. Nobody's overstating the facts. That's what, of course, those of us who have feared the coming illiberalism in this country, we've always been accused of being melodramatic. It plays out in the numbers. Just 10 years ago, the idea that 40% of either party would say violence against the federal government is okay would be unthinkable.
This is a great example of the normalization of extremism. There have always been armed militias, and there have always been anti-government activists like sovereign citizens and whatnot, but they were the lunatic fringe. They were on the margins, and what's so deeply disturbing is how they've moved from the margins to the mainstream. And we have, public persons and people in elected positions, Joe, that deny this, that dismiss this, and we do so at our own peril. And make no mistake, those marauders who staged the terror attack, and I would call January 6th the most predictable terror attack in the history of our country, because they told us they were going to do it. They had zip ties. They intended to try members of Congress, and they weren't distinguishing between Republicans and Democrats. Their goal was to stop the certification of the election, and it was literally to stage a kind of coup. This should worry you, whether you're a liberal or a conservative, a Republican or a Democrat. This threatens all of us today, and we've simply got to recognize that fact if we want to change it.
So, Eddie Glaude, there's always been a paranoid style in American politics. We've had John Meacham coming on talking about it a good bit. Even after Pearl Harbor, for some time, there were people who hated FDR that said FDR knew Pearl Harbor was coming, but he wanted America to go to war, so they just let the Japanese bomb us. I grew up hearing people saying that LBJ was responsible for the assassination of Kennedy. We, of course, had the Clinton Chronicles, where Jerry Falwell sold videotapes saying that Bill Clinton had killed all of these people in Arkansas. Of course, I also heard that George H.W. Bush was responsible for spreading crack around South Central L.A. We actually had members of Congress spreading that conspiracy theory. Barack Obama, of course, the conspiracy theory that he wasn't born in America. He was a Muslim secretly who wanted to impose Sharia law on America. This paranoia has been with us for a very long time, as Jonathan said, on the extremes, but it was weaponized during the Trump era. And January the 6th was the best example of that. And these continued threats over the past year just show how extreme, and these polls show how these extremists have become mainstream in the Republican Party.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that classic essay by the historian Richard Hofstadter about the paranoid style of American politics still looms large, still is true in so many ways. But, you know, I think there's also the fact of our history, Joe. There's been paranoia, of course, in our politics, but there's also been violence that has overshadowed in so many ways very dark moments in our history. And the unthinkable has, for some people in this country, been a kind of reality. The fact that the country would turn its back on people, would sanction extra-state violence, extra-legal violence. This is nothing new. I mean, I'm thinking as I was listening to Jonathan about a speech that Dr. King gave at a rabbinical assembly in 1968, where Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel introduced him. And during the Q&A, Dr. King said something that was really striking. He said that America would have to face something that we really don't want to face, and that is how profoundly racist we are. He said, racism, and I'm quoting him here, Joe, racism still occupies the throne of the nation. This is in 1968, right? And of course, King would be dead within 9 days of making that remark. So I'm wondering, as I think about Jonathan's claim, and this question goes to Jonathan, Joe, what do you make of this history of hate that has in some ways shadowed the Democratic Republic of the country, and this current iteration of hate in this moment, as you kind of unpack what the unthinkable is?
Well, there's no question that this country has a history, from the treatment of the indigenous people when this nation was founded to the enslavement of Africans that has so characterized, the growth of the country in the 1800s, to the persistence of Jim Crow and the unwillingness to accept immigrants, whether they were Asian American, or Jews like my forebears. Hate has been an issue for a long time, and it isn't new, as you're pointing out. And yet, the other frightening thing that's happening today is you're seeing hate now being spoken so openly by the former president of the United States and by his acolytes like Steve Bannon and the others, who are literally making this overtly their open way they hope to govern in the future. And, people like Steve Bannon are very open about the fact that they want to dismantle the state and commit us to a kind of anarchy. Right. So I think that is so profoundly troubling. And there's another thing we need to point out. What's new about today, what makes this so insidious, is the willingness of social media, which has so now dominated our public debate, to amplify the most intolerant voices. Because look, in the 1960s, when Dr. King was coming into the fore, there were certainly intolerant politicians in the South, if you will. There were people like the John Birch Society and the KKK who railed against him. But it wasn't necessarily easy to find those people, for example, on the equivalent of Morning Joe. But today, thanks to Facebook, those voices are amplified to hundreds of millions of people, not on a daily basis, not on an hourly basis, but minute by minute, with none of the filters and none of the checks and balances that we used to have. So I think that amplification is deeply frightening. And if you think about everything from the anti-vax movement to, again, this kind of political extremism, to the ugly illiberalism, social media is a big determinant in why we have these problems today.
There's no question about it. It's a topic we hit almost every day on this show, that there is now a platform and a place for people, like-minded people, to gather on those issues. Let's end the segment, Jonathan, if we can, to talk about how we avoid the unthinkable in this country. What do you see as some prescriptions to get us off a track you believe we're on?
Well, I'm glad you asked. That's why I really wrote the book. It's all about what are the strategies and tactics we can employ to stop this. Number one, we've got to call out hate when it happens. Willie. I think it's so critical. Neither side of the political spectrum is exempt from ignorance or intolerance. So whether you're on the left or the right, all of us need to call it out when it happens at the water cooler, in the classroom, on the college campus, in the house of worship. Number one, confront it. That's critical. Number two, I think we need to be able to participate openly in our democracy. Legislators who would restrict the right to vote, community members who would impose their ideas on other people. We've got to stop that. We need to literally reinvigorate civil society. And then finally, I think it comes back to sort of social media and norms. Willie, we've got to move past a kind of moral relativism. There are absolute truths. There are real values like decency, humanism, tolerance, and we need to re-inject those, I believe, into the public square.
The new book is entitled It Could Happen Here: Why America is Tipping from Hate to the Unthinkable and How We Can Stop It. CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. And